All right, so 7 and 8. These guys are, I would say, more second round probably. But again, we'll see. I think it's easy to maybe even overvalue guys and give them a grade. But remember, like there's a select number of picks. Won't be shocked if this guy's name is announced in the second round of the NFL draft. Running back from Texas, Jonathon Brooks. I really like Jonathon Brooks. Now, full disclosure, I've been able to cover Texas a few times over the last few years. And the first time I got to sit with Jonathon Brooks was actually this year when we went down and covered Texas. And Brooks is one of those guys that I got to tell you, like his maturity when he sat in front of me, the way he talked about the team and his chance finally arriving. Because remember, he sits behind Bijan and Roschon Johnson and didn't get many opportunities to catch the football, run the football, touch the football, impact the game. And yet he just waited and continued to prepare, held the locker room together and was a core guy for Steve Sarkisian, really a core guy, and then burst on the scene this year. And then we did that game against Kansas State, and man, I was thoroughly impressed, not just in our meetings on Friday with him in person, but also his game. I'm sitting there and evaluating Jonathon Brooks prior to that game, and I'm thinking to myself, he does everything that the NFL wants him to do. He can slash in between the tackles. He can hit home runs outside of the tackles. He catches the football really well. Very smooth catcher of the football. Doesn't leave his feet. He can run routes. And I start thinking to myself, this works at the next level. This works at the next level, which makes him a guy that I want to plant my flag on. Like this is a player that I believe will have a lot of success in the National Football League. He might not be as dynamic as Bijan Robinson, which is why he won't go in the first round, or maybe even Jahmyr Gibbs, but he possesses similar qualities as those guys in that he can do everything that you require a running back to do from the backfield, and he can be a threat catching the football. Christian McCaffrey has started this trend, and you could even go back before that. You can go back to Marshall Faulk or several guys that could really catch it and be dangerous out of the backfield. Your Sproles, those types of players. But McCaffrey is the modern guy that everyone looks at and it's like, okay, to be a great elite running back in this league, you really have to impact the game on both sides as a runner and a pass catcher. That's why Gibbs was so valuable. That's why Bijan was so valuable. And now I think that's why Jonathon Brooks is going to have a successful career and why it's a very easy proclamation to sit here and say Jonathon Brooks is going to be a really good pro. All right, 3 more. I've got so my 8th guy, I think he could be a second rounder. He might be early third round. I'm not totally sure. But again, it's going to depend on how fast a lot of these wide receivers go. And this wide receiver is from Michigan and didn't get a ton of opportunities, I would call it. But Roman Wilson from Michigan is a guy that nobody talks about, is quietly generating, I would say, a significant amount of buzz in the draft process via his performance at the Senior Bowl, his testing at the Combine. It's going very well for him. And because of that, I think he may have gotten himself into a second round pick. He's got really good hands, elite speed. He ran 4.39 at the Combine. Now, you could say like, well, he only had 48 catches this season. And I would say, yeah, well, 12 of them were touchdowns. Like the guy knows how to score. And then I would also say he was, and I struggle to use this word, but he was I don't want to say victim, but he was a product is the better word. I'm going to say he was a product of the Michigan system. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's not like they were just 3 yards in a cloud of dust, because they did things and threw the ball to him in special ways and designed things for him. You know, the Nebraska game was great for him. If you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing some of those highlights right now. The catch he made against Ohio State was next level for a touchdown. They schemed for him against Purdue because Purdue is a mainly man coverage team. So they used his elite speed to run crossing routes and in particular deep over routes and got him isolated one-on-one and then had big plays because of that. Roman's a really good player, and no one knows it because Michigan had a very specific philosophy of how they were going to win. J.J. McCarthy is in this boat as well. He is a product of the Michigan way. Okay. And again, it's not a bad thing because that's how they won a national championship, but they checked their ego at the door. J.J. McCarthy and Roman Wilson could have sat there and said, hey, we're elite players. Roman Wilson could have easily been a 85, 90 catch guy for 1,000+ yards and 15 to 20 touchdowns in any other program in the country. He's that good. Trust me. That's why I believe in him as what I would say an undervalued prospect in this process. Roman Wilson is a guy that I would plant a flag on. I think he's going to be really good. And again, was around that team a lot, which is why my 9th guy is another Michigan player. Mike Sainristil. I don't know where Mike Sainristil is going to get drafted. In my mind, I'm like late second round, early third. But I have no idea where he's going to get drafted because there's a lot of unknowns based on his size and so on and so forth, all these measurables. Here's what I do not have a question about with Mike Sainristil. His ability to impact a football game at defensive back. He's the best nickelback in the country. And he's only played defense for 2 years. So similar to what I was talking about earlier in this podcast with Olu Fashanu, the tackle from Penn State, in terms of this upside that he has and the potential that he has and this idea that he's going to continue to improve, I hold that the same way with Mike Sainristil as I do with Olu Fashanu. Mikey Sainristil was one of my favorite players to cover over the last couple of years. First and foremost, you talk about a team player. He switched positions a couple of years ago. He was a wide receiver and he moves to nickelback and he's started right away and he had no idea what he was doing. And he goes out there and he just starts making plays. And by the end of his career, so at the end of his second year at defensive back, he was the defender on the best defense in the country that every other offensive coordinator would talk about. We got to know where Mike Sainristil is. The guy just makes plays. He's a matchup issue for us. And it's like, well, why? It's like, because he can do everything. He's a Swiss Army knife back there. And in that way, he was a bit of an amoeba in their defense. He played nickel, but he was up near the line of scrimmage. And then all of a sudden, he would be back at safety. He was exceptional. Jim Harbaugh raves about him. Again, selfless player. And he possesses all of these innate instincts that you just can't teach. And that's the only way you can have the amount of success that he did on the defensive side, having only played 2 years of defensive football. I think Mikey Sainristil, gosh, I hesitated. When I was preparing for this, I was just like, am I going to say this? I'm going to say this. I don't want to do it, and I did it earlier already with Jerzon Newton. Mikey Sainristil reminds me, this is not a direct comparison, but in terms of their ability to play freely and roam and be a nuisance for the offense, he reminds me he's in the same vein as, although not a direct comparison as, like an Ed Reed or a Honey Badger. Like these guys that just, they're always around the ball. They have this innate ability to not just play the structure of the defense, but to impact the play out of that structure. And Sainristil has that. And that's why I'm really confident. Like this guy is not only going to stick, he's going to be able to contribute on special teams right away. He's going to be able to get on the field, and I guarantee you, Mikey Sainristil is on the field making plays next year as a rookie. So he's another one. I'm planting a flag on Mikey Sainristil. And then my last guy, and a guy that I covered a couple of times during his career, but mostly early this last season in his first game of this last year. Safety from Minnesota, Tyler Nuban. Tyler's a really good player. And again, second, third, maybe late third, but he's got really solid instincts and ball skills. his coaching staff raved about his leadership, his work ethic, his commitment, all of those things, which lets you know that he's going to be able to walk into a pro locker room and he won't be overwhelmed. He had 12 interceptions over the last 3 years. He had 5 this last season. He had 2 in the game that I did against Nebraska, although Nebraska was basically passing the football the equivalent of punts. That was a little harsh, but you know what, whatever. Nuban is a guy that I think is a prototypical middle of the field player. He can play down low if you need him to, but he's better from the middle just because of his instincts. He's got good size. He probably needs to run a touch better, but he's physical enough to go in the NFL game and really excel right away. So Tyler Nuban is a guy. And there's a couple of players that, although not direct comparisons, but he kind of reminds me of in terms of these guys that might not be elite first-round style players, but I just know based on their football IQ, their instincts, their ability to impact games, I just have a deep feeling like he's going to succeed. I had that same feeling with Jair Brown from Penn State, Tig Brown. I had that same feeling with Jordan Fuller out of Ohio State. And guess what? They got on the field right away and impacted games right away. And that's how I feel about Tyler Nuban. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you like this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. And you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.